Thank you, and welcome to what I hope will be our only ever virtual International Citizen of the Year Award dinner. This year, we are honoring a San Antonio and international treasure, Dr. Larry Schlesinger of Texas Biomedical Research Institute. I hope you're enjoying your Don Strange dinner baskets and goodies from a fun and safe location. Now, let's get on with this unique experience. But first, there's some people I need to thank. I'd like to give a shout out to our Board of Trustees. Their names are in your program, and normally I would ask them to stand, but this year I'll have to settle for a big thank you for all you do. A super special thank you goes to Carlos Alvarez and Gambrinas, who have once again graciously offered to be our lead sponsor. Thank you, Armin Babajanian, our wonderful CEO, who has managed to stay the course at this time of virtual connections, Zoom meetings, and interminable conference calls. And thank you, Jamie Cook and Jalen Events, for coordinating this amazing and successful evening. This is Jamie's 5th and most challenging year to create a memorable evening for us all. I personally would like to thank Jill and A.B. Cruz, who graciously agreed to chair this event. And I would be horribly remiss if I didn't thank my dear friend and mentor and immediate past chair of the World Affairs Council, Patricia Diaz-Dennis. Patricia has positioned the council to be strong and vibrant, and under her leadership, we've grown and matured as an organization. She's a powerful leader, and I know I will have big shoes to fill. Finally, thank you to each of our sponsors for stepping up and supporting the World Affairs Council and helping us achieve our mission during such a time of disruption. It becomes increasingly vital every year for us to embrace global citizenship and ensure that our youth become literate in global issues. The World Affairs Council is committed to educating and empowering the youth of San Antonio to be global participants through programs such as Academic World Quest, where the council in a normal year would pay for the winning team and its chaperones to attend the Malou and Carlos Alvarez Academic World Quest National Competition in Washington, D.C. This year, our local competition was virtual. Congratulations to Keystone for taking first place and TMI for taking second and third places. They will participate in the national finals virtually. We also pay for scholarships for students pursuing degrees in international affairs. We host student interns and give them insight into our organization and a glimpse at how average citizens can facilitate international relationships. In addition, through partnerships with local colleges and universities, we invite students to attend programs hosted by our council and by councils nationwide. This year, a global pandemic made us all confront just how small this planet is. A virus, first detected in China, leaped around the world, impacting almost every single country. We tried distancing ourselves and yet cooperating with other nations. We shared best practices and learned from each other's successes and mistakes. Together, we can forge alliances that will help or even avert future global crises. The World Affairs Council strives to create international understanding through our programs. We reach out to other countries through ambassadors, dignitaries, scholars, and politicians to help us make connections around the world. I hope you all will become members of the council if you're not, and take advantage of our programming. Plus, membership is a great way to support the council. Again, thank you for participating tonight in honoring Dr. Larry Schlesinger. I hope you're having a good time wherever you are, and I know you are looking forward to hearing from Dr. Schlesinger and Dr. Bloom. It's my honor now to introduce you to this year's International Citizen of the Year Award dinner chairs, Jill and A.B. Cruz. Jill and A.B. are truly dynamos. Jill is a certified executive coach and career development consultant with over 20 years of experience, specializing in women attorneys' career and talent development. She's a tireless advocate for gender and racio-ethnic diversity, equity, and inclusion in the legal profession. AB is board member extraordinaire. Not only is he the chair of the governance committee, but he also serves on the development committee and the audit committee. In addition, he serves on many community boards. AB comes to his interest in world affairs naturally. He's a retired Rear Admiral, having served over 30 years in the Navy, where he represented the United States internationally. Currently, AB is a senior advisor at Barker Gilmore, where he provides executive coaching, leadership development, and executive search services to legal leaders, CEOs, and corporate boards.
Peggy, thank you very much for your very kind and most generous introduction. Jill and I truly appreciate it. We are indeed honored and privileged to serve the World Affairs Council of San Antonio as this year's International Citizen of the Year Award Celebration co-chairs. Peggy, as you have aptly highlighted, this past year has been unprecedented, trying and challenging for everyone in so many different ways. Yet, amid the many difficulties, countless blessings and silver linings have found their way to the surface. This evening is one of those very special blessings, an opportunity to recognize the many contributions and accomplishments of a true San Antonio asset, Dr. Larry Schlesinger. So Peggy, thank you and your predecessor, Patricia Diaz-Dennis, for leading the World Affairs Council through this uncertain period. Your leadership has made all the difference in the world and allowed us to hold this first ever and hopefully last ever virtual International Citizen of the Year Award celebration.
AB and I want to add our warmest welcome to everyone joining us this evening. Thank you for supporting the World Affairs Council and for helping us honor Dr. Schlesinger. AB and I, and well, actually our entire family, are big believers in the mission of World Affairs Council. Indeed, we see it as a real life imperative, specifically that the citizens of our great city of San Antonio, both young and old alike, need to have and will always greatly benefit from a robust and full appreciation of the dynamic nature, intricacies, and inner workings of this world we live in. So with that important mission in heart, we thank each of you for joining us for this wonderful celebration, and we extend our profound gratitude and well wishes to all those who generously supported this event. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Armin Babajanian, Chief Executive Officer of the World Affairs Council of San Antonio. I want to thank you for tuning in tonight for our special program. I especially want to thank our sponsors and supporters who have taken the time and their dollars to support the World Affairs Council. In 1982, the World Affairs Council started with true local visionaries who stepped up to start an organization in order to educate the community about what is taking place around the world. Today, we honor Dr. Larry Schlesinger, who is one of those visionary leaders who has stepped up to the plate to put Texas Biomedical Research Institute at the forefront of battling infectious diseases locally and internationally. We are grateful for his leadership and his ideas, and to have him locally here is something that we are so grateful for. Congratulations to Dr. Larry Schlesinger.
Now, before Jill and I introduce Speaker Joe Strauss, who will introduce this year's honoree, we first invite you to view some video tributes that were submitted by a few fans of Dr. Schlesinger and Texas Biomed. Take a look and enjoy.
Texas Biomedical Research Institute's mission is to protect you, your loved ones, and really our global community from the threat of infectious diseases. Our scientists are on the cutting edge of research, aiming to understand, how people become infected with these diseases, how we can create new diagnostics, therapies, and vaccines, really all in an effort to impact the health of our global community in a positive way.
I led the search committee for our new CEO here at Texas Biomed. And Larry Schlesinger was the perfect profile for what we were looking for. And that is somebody that could lead a transformation of Texas Biomed. Little did we know that a couple of years into this transition that Larry led so brilliantly, there was a report out of Wuhan that something was going on.
Larry has spent his entire career working towards helping individuals from the impacts of infectious diseases. And I would really like to recognize him for his vision that he brought as the Chief Executive Officer of Texas Biomedical Research Institute. Larry has come in and taken, the reins and done an excellent job.
Larry's leadership style is one in which he focuses on people and really is able to motivate the team with our mission. He's passionate about helping people. He's passionate about science. And that passion really has translated into building a global center for infectious disease research.
Everybody in San Antonio knows Texas Biomed. They know that this is the place where we're doing research on interesting things. And then to bring in somebody like Larry Schlesinger, who can build a management team and drive this place to deliver more, better, for less money than any other institution in the United States, and have a community that embraces it. There isn't another one. That's not an exaggeration. There's one. It's here in San Antonio, and it all starts with the ability to create health and stabilize it in the world of infectious disease for something like a pandemic.
He knew that the question was not if, but when the next pandemic would occur. And clearly we've been in the middle of that. But he had the vision to make sure that we had the right people in place, the right scientific equipment, and the right facilities, including a brand new state-of-the-art biosafety level 3 laboratory that was built in 2019 to allow Texas Biomed to play a critical role in the fight against COVID-19.
The work continues, and during this pandemic, we have active programs in tuberculosis and HIV, in Zika, in Ebola. All these programs that are going on campus didn't stop, right? But the scientists who are working those were able to then dedicate part of their time, part of their labs to COVID coming on board. And I applaud everybody on this campus who have come in, and this isn't a 9-to-5 job. Right? You're running lab experiments, you're running studies that are 24/7.
Being a visionary, Dr. Schlesinger was prepared for a potential pandemic here at Texas Biomed and put things into place that enabled them to quickly come up with the animal model for COVID-19. Texas Biomed has worked with several vaccine manufacturers and pulling them in to work on the animal models and refining those, as well as using those animal models to test their specific vaccines and therapeutics. It still surprised me how fast they did it, because that is just unheard of, how fast they made that happen. And it's a worldwide impact.
Every day, every hour, every minute that we're sooner to get through the science and get something to market, the faster we can start countering the effects of such a pandemic. And if anything, you're not talking, tens or hundreds of people, you're talking hundreds of thousands or millions of people that are at risk or can be saved because of this process.
Texas Biomed, under the leadership of Larry Schlesinger, has now created a global brand where people know if they want to get basic infectious disease research done quickly at a quality level, this is the place that they come to.
So from discovery science happening where folks are looking at how a virus propagates, all the way to PR working on letting the Pfizers and the Regenerons and the Novavaxes and everybody else know we're here as a partner to help you do this quickly. That's a broad spectrum of activity. And so the best thing I think people in town can know and know about Larry is he understands that from bench to bedside, right? And where we can play a significant role in moving that forward quickly.
Larry, on behalf of the board of Texas Biomed, we want to send our heartfelt thanks and congratulations. I can't think of anyone that deserves this award more. The mission of this organization is to promote the understanding of the intersection of global public affairs, foreign policy as it relates to this community, this nation, and this world, and how you have led us through this pandemic and transformed this institute up onto the stage of being a global player. No one deserves this award more. So thank you very much from the board of Texas Biomed.
Although this next gentleman needs no introduction, AB and I are going to embarrass him anyway. The Honorable Joseph Strauss III, or simply Speaker Strauss, is the former Texas House Speaker and someone who has spent his entire career at the intersection of public policy, business, and politics. Joe served as the Speaker of the House from 2009 to 2019, making him one of the longest-serving speakers in state history. Today, Joe serves as the chairman of the Texas Forever Forward Political Action Committee.
Speaker Strauss has long been known for his focus on the core responsibilities of government and his constructive governing style. Through much of his career, he has focused on the priorities and issues that foster private sector growth, such as strong public schools, outstanding colleges and universities, a reliable water supply, a modern transportation system, and policies that embrace the diversity and respect the dignity of all who want to work and invest in Texas. Speaker Strauss has also been a champion for improving the state's behavioral health care system and investing more dollars in child protection.
In addition to his policy achievements, Speaker Strauss has championed an inclusive and pragmatic approach to governing that brings Texans together to confront major challenges. In 2017, he led the successful fight against discriminatory legislation that threatened severe economic harm. As a result of his principled stand on that issue, the Dallas Morning News named Speaker Strauss the 2017 Texan of the Year. Today, in addition to leading the Texas Forward Forever PAC, Joe continues to serve on numerous boards and committees for various political, leadership, and civic organizations.
Speaker Strauss is a proud fifth-generation Texan and a native San Antonian. He is a graduate of Vanderbilt University. He and his wife, Julie, live in San Antonio and have 2 adult daughters. Ladies and gentlemen, we give you the Honorable Joseph Strauss III.
Good evening. I'm Joe Strauss, and it's my honor to introduce the 2021 International Citizen of the Year, Dr. Larry Schlesinger. Long before this moment in time, back when we would actually gather for events like this rather than logging on to them, Dr. Schlesinger was an internationally recognized research scientist and one of the most consequential leaders of our community of San Antonio. He is a remarkable story, a first-generation American from New Jersey and the son of parents who survived the Holocaust. Larry's been a leading voice in the field of infectious disease research for decades. Most of his career has been spent at esteemed academic institutions, such as the University of Iowa and Ohio State, where he wrote books, authored hundreds of articles, and conducted research supported by funders as prestigious as the National Institutes of Health and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. In 2017, encouraged by his wife, always, Judy, Dr. Schlesinger left the familiar trappings of the Big Ten Conference, came to South Texas, and began the next chapter of his career at a different type of institution, where he became president and CEO of the Texas Biomedical Research Institute. It takes just the right person to pull together all the resources that maximize the impact of scientific research. It takes someone who doesn't just know science, but who understands the worlds of public policy, philanthropy, business, and perhaps most importantly, knows how to communicate with an often reactionary public. This longtime scientist and first-time CEO was exactly the right person to answer that calling. And from the time he arrived 4 years ago, he has taken Texas Biomed to even greater heights. He added faculty, he restructured the leadership, and he accelerated fundraising. And like all great leaders, he had a vision. His vision was that Texas Biomed scientists would not just stay in their individual research silos and do their work on the 200-acre campus in Northwest San Antonio. In light of the growth of superbugs that were less susceptible to traditional medicines, he knew a different approach to infectious diseases was needed. As Dr. Schlesinger explained to a group in 2018, the key to combating infectious diseases differently was an approach he called team science. As smart and accomplished as Dr. Schlesinger is, I doubt even he knew how relevant his vision would prove to be just a couple of years later. Dr. Schlesinger and his team have put Texas Biomed on the front lines of fighting the coronavirus pandemic. Early in the crisis, they sprang into action. Dr. Schlesinger and Texas Biomed raised $5 million in just 2 weeks to quickly launch studies that led to a partnership with Pfizer, a partnership that was essential to the development of the Pfizer vaccine that is now being given every day. In other words, right here in San Antonio, Texas Biomed has played a substantial role in the fight against this pandemic. The fact that Texas Biomed does innovative research and does it quickly helped bring effective vaccines to the public faster than even many experts thought possible. There's obviously a way to go, and the fight is not over. But thanks in no small part to Texas Biomed and to Dr. Schlesinger, newly vaccinated seniors are physically embracing their grandchildren for the first time in a year. And teachers are seeing a future where they are no longer putting their health at risk to educate kids. We overcome crises like COVID-19 due to the leadership of people who are made for unique moments in history. Not only was the mission of Texas Biomed made for this moment, but so was its leader. How grateful we are that Larry and Judy decided to bring their unique gifts to San Antonio just a few years ago. And how proud must be his father, who is still with us today, as well as Larry and Judy's 2 children and their grandchildren. Dr. Schlesinger has demonstrated the unique ability to mobilize and harness his team of world-class experts to make a truly meaningful contribution to lives all around the world. And as those superbugs he talked about continue to proliferate, his leadership will become even more vital. For that, he is a pioneer, he is a visionary, and there is no doubt he is truly an outstanding citizen. So it's my privilege and my honor to introduce the 2021 International Citizen of the Year, the President and CEO of Texas Biomed, Dr. Larry Schlesinger.
Well, I would like to thank the World Affairs Council for this amazing honor. Through my work as both a physician and a scientist, I have spent my career in global affairs, striving to make the world a better and healthier place. So I am truly grateful and humbled to receive this honorable distinction. And I am equally proud to be among the esteemed community leaders who have received this award and whom I now count as friends, including the Honorable Joe Strauss, Henry Cisneros, among others, true game changers for the city of San Antonio who have impacted the country and the world. In my personal life and my professional career, I have come to learn that nothing great comes to an individual without a team behind them. Essentially, everything is a team sport. I had humble beginnings growing up in New Jersey to hardworking immigrant parents who, along with my brother and sister, taught me the importance of a strong work ethic and striving to achieve lofty goals. My wife, Judy, and my children, Michael and Eva, have been my rock and my backbone. They have certainly kept me grounded, and they provide me with tremendous strength. And my professional teams, now at Texas Biomed and throughout San Antonio, have been terrific colleagues. I've been fortunate to work with some amazing people who continue to teach me every day and provide broad perspectives to our work. It has taken all of these people in my life working together as effective teams to achieve great progress. As a lifelong student learner, I've been blessed with the opportunity to learn from some of the brightest minds in the world. As a teacher, I've had the honor of helping shape young thinkers and thus shape our future. And through my research, I've had the privilege of traveling the world and seeing firsthand the magnitude of human suffering, but more importantly, the resilience of the human spirit. Across the world, the human condition may be different, but everyone strives for safety, connection, and happiness. And people often work together to achieve these goals, despite sometimes the news being contrary. As we have seen time and time again this past year, we are truly only one world. Whether we're in Bangladesh, Paris, Nairobi, or San Antonio, we've all yearned for the same things: safety and connection. And we found happiness in cheering for those who are caring for us. I'm so grateful to have found a home in San Antonio where the values of teamwork and community are so strong. I also serve on the Biomed SA board, the San Antonio Medical Foundation board. I'm very proud to be a founding partner in the San Antonio Partnership for Precision Therapeutics, working along my fellow colleagues, presidents at the UT System and SWERI. I have found that San Antonio places a unique value in support of science that I've not typically seen in my other experiences around the world. I believe this is truly our secret sauce. This is the type of support we need nationally and globally. My vision and passion are for transformational rather than incremental change. Science can't save the world with incremental support and funding. This mindset has left us unprepared for the pandemic we currently face. But if we strive to support science in a big way, as our community has done, we can see big wins and be in a better position for the future and for our children. While I appreciate being honored tonight, and I truly do, I want to thank you for recognizing that I believe to be one of the true heroes of this moment in history, and that is science. In fact, I accept this award on behalf of scientists worldwide who have worked tirelessly to discover and create biomedical breakthroughs we need to end this pandemic and certainly to prepare us better for the next one. Thank you all tremendously for bestowing upon me this wonderful honor. I'm humbled. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us at this important event. Tonight, I speak to you as both a member of the Board of Trustees of the World Affairs Council and as Mayor of San Antonio. As such, it is twice the honor to be here to congratulate Dr. Larry Schlesinger as the International Citizen of the Year. My support for the World Affairs Council of San Antonio is deep-seated and heartfelt. This vital organization, under the leadership of Chair Peggy Pace and Executive Director Armin Babajanian, understands on a fundamental level the interconnectedness of our world and has long been instrumental in encouraging our residents, students, and leaders to become active participants in the global community. Their highest honor this year, exemplifying all they stand for, goes to a distinguished member of that community. We have all read about the myriad accomplishments of Larry Schlesinger and are hearing that Texas Biomedical Research Institute's outstanding work on the front end of this discovery pipeline was instrumental in developing the first authorized vaccine in the United States to prevent COVID-19. This historic achievement underscores the significance of Dr. Larry Schlesinger's leadership and the critical work Texas Biomedical Research Institute is doing locally for the global good. We're also learning more about his prolific writings, his innovative management techniques, and his drive to make the Institute the global leader in eradicating infectious diseases from the world. However, what I would like to emphasize tonight is really his optimism, his sense of hope, and his confidence that together, on a national, local, and global scale, we all as individuals can make a difference to overcome this pandemic. Here I'm paraphrasing what he said, but he speaks of the need to move forward from a reactive and frightened community to a proactive and prepared society. As the mayor of our city, it resonates with me to hear such words of resiliency and cooperation. This pandemic has exposed so many gaps, challenges, and disparities, but it has also provided an opportunity for us to learn, for us to educate ourselves, to work together, and to trust in science and common sense. This echoes what I hear from our amazing staff at Metro Health as they daily face the trials of this pandemic. We all need to be careful and to take care of each other. I'm inspired by such a simple, logical, and decent code espoused by our hardworking healthcare workers, by our honoree, Larry Schlesinger, and by the eminent scholar and global health expert, Dr. Barry Bloom, who honors us tonight as the keynote speaker. Dr. Bloom's work in alleviating the burdens of disease throughout the world is profound, humane, and urgent. It's incumbent upon us to listen to their voices and to the voice of science and compassion. May we all be inspired together. Thank you again to the World Affairs Council for their example in leading and honoring in difficult times.
Now it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Barry Bloom. Dr. Bloom is a leading scientist in the areas of infectious diseases, vaccines, and global health, and a former consultant to the White House. Impressive as that is, even more impressive is Dr. Bloom's participation as a high school student in the Junior World Affairs Council of Philadelphia, and he's continued his global interest in the ensuing years. But aside from his involvement with the council, he's been extensively involved with the World Health Organization for more than 40 years. Dr. Bloom has been instrumental in research into malaria, leprosy, tuberculosis, and AIDS. He was the founding chair of the Board of Trustees for the International Vaccine Institute in South Korea, which is devoted to promoting vaccine development for children in the developing world. Dr. Bloom became Dean of Faculty at the Harvard School of Public Health in 1998 and is now a Harvard University Distinguished Service Professor. As Dean, he served as Secretary-Treasurer for the Association of Schools of Public Health. Dr. Bloom is a member of the National Academy of Sciences, Institutes of Medicine, and the American Association for the Advancement of Science. I know we are all just waiting to hear what Dr. Bloom and Dr. Schlesinger have to say. The format this evening is a fireside chat. We ask sponsors and guests to submit questions ahead of time, but we encourage you to ask questions as we go along. I will try to relay as many questions as we can take to Drs. Bloom and Schlesinger. So sit back wherever you are and enjoy. And now, before we get started with our chat, I need to share with you a letter of tribute we just received from President George W. Bush. Greetings to those gathered to honor Dr. Larry Schlesinger as he's presented with the 2021 International Citizen of the Year Award by the World Affairs Council of San Antonio. Dr. Schlesinger has dedicated his life to caring for others and helping them live longer, healthier lives. As a physician, author, and researcher, his contributions to medicine have had far-reaching benefits. I am grateful for Larry's commitment to bring hope and healing to so many and applaud his efforts to protect the public from the threat of infectious diseases. Laura and I join Larry's family in adding our congratulations as he receives this well-deserved accolade. We send our best wishes for a meaningful celebration. George Bush. In addition, we received a Senate resolution honoring Dr. Schlesinger from Texas Senator Jose Menendez. Now, on with the show.
And I want to thank the Honorable Joe Strauss. I want to thank the mayor for their comments this evening. They mean a lot to me. And as you heard earlier, I am accepting this award in behalf of all the scientists around the world who have worked so hard and diligently on combating COVID-19. We're not out of the woods yet, but we're getting there, and there is hope for the future. I'm thrilled to be sitting here in this fireside chat this evening with my good friend and colleague, Barry Bloom, who I've known for many, many years in science, but also all the great work he does on a global landscape. Good evening, Barry, and we're happy to have you here in San Antonio. Barry and I are going to be talking about a global perspective on our threats related to infectious diseases. At least one economist has predicted that by 2050, infectious diseases will be the #1 killer of humans on the planet, to the tune of 10 million extra lives a year. Infectious disease, therefore, represents a major challenge for us on a global perspective, and one that we need to take very seriously. The good news is, with the advance of science, we've been able to come a long way with COVID-19. And with the vaccines accelerating out, we'll be able to start thinking about control of this particular virus and moving back towards a more normal state, perhaps by the end of the year. However, those threats will not be over. And we, as infectious disease experts and those that think about infectious disease on a global landscape, are already worried about what might happen, for example, with a COVID-24 or COVID-36. So one of the problems that we face with infectious diseases is that 2 to 3 years from now, when the number of cases are reduced and we get back to life in a more normal sense, that we will not necessarily keep a sustainable force going forward to think about the next infectious disease challenge that we may face. Resources won't be there. Public health infrastructure will not be resourced to the degree that it needs to. And therefore, we need to really think about a different way of handling infectious diseases from the standpoint of new diagnostics, therapies, and vaccines. We need to think about a global perspective where scientists, where the private sector, academia, the public sector in general, and the community begin to think about a proactive way to address infectious disease threats more effectively, where we're in a more constant mode with discovering new potential molecular diagnostic tests, where we can think about new therapeutic approaches and new vaccine platforms and apply them before we're in the middle of a crisis. This is going to take a new organizational structure of people working together on a global level. And I believe that Texas Biomedical Research Institute is well positioned to meet that challenge. We have some very unique aspects to our institute with regard to our ability to perform cutting edge research, which is really the foundation of what we do at the Institute related to infectious diseases. And more than just infectious disease, that is the bug itself, is the fact that we're focused on susceptible populations for infectious diseases. We have tremendous programs related to problems in the immune system of aging, people with metabolic dysfunction, such as diabetes or obesity. These individuals, we've learned from COVID-19, are particularly susceptible to viruses and other microbes. So let me start, Barry, by saying how honored I am, and we all are in San Antonio, to have you with us this evening. Great that you could join us.
It is enormous pleasure to share with you and the World Affairs Council the honor that's been provided to you, which I think is wonderful for a good friend, a wonderful scientist, and a global citizen. So congratulations to all.
Thank you, Barry. Barry, what I'd like to do in this fireside chat, it's more informal that we're speaking here this evening. If I think back even just a few years, we had this unknown infection going on in 2003. We needed to discover it was a virus, and we found out it was a coronavirus, and we called it SARS. In 2009, we had the H1N1 influenza outbreak. In 2012, we had the MERS outbreak in the Middle East. 2014, we had a huge outbreak of Ebola virus in Western Africa, and we had a few cases here in Texas. So we've had a number of our challenges we faced even in the recent past. Now, you've been involved in these infectious disease outbreaks for decades and have been involved in some of the most influential committees on a global stage. I wanted to ask you, what is your perspective on what we've learned over the years, starting with history? What have we learned with these challenges, and what are some of the challenges we face today?
Thanks very much for a wonderful open-ended question. Maybe I would start in a curious way with Texas. Before I became dean, there was a question whether a senator from your state would support an increase into the budget of the National Institutes of Health. And Harris Polls was engaged to query the public on whether they would pay $1 a week for biomedical research. And in that poll, 77% of Texans said they would indeed pay $1 a week for biomedical research. And needless to say, the senator voted in favor of the NIH approved budget. In that same year, the same pollsters asked whether the public knew what public health was. And the answer was 7% thought they did, and nobody checked. So I think one of the things we've learned from that list of global epidemics and threats is there is something called public health. It's very important. And one of its problems is that if we do our job well in public health, there's very little to see. And your long list indicates that we haven't done our job as well as it could have, and we have lots to learn. I think a second lesson, since you mentioned SARS in 2003, I had the privilege of being invited by the Ministry of Health in China after it was clear that they had allowed the epidemic to get out of control. And I, with a colleague a Chinese colleague who is now Dean of the School of Public Health at Peking University, were asked what they needed to do better. And there were three things they needed to do better. Their science was terrible. They really didn't have the science to cope with an epidemic. Their inter-provincial communications was terrible, and their ability to provide risk information to the public was poor. If we jump ahead to COVID-19, the first point I would make is their science has become superb, and that we are very much indebted to the first identification of the clinical symptoms, the case presentation of COVID by the head of the China CDC, who was trained, by the way, at Oxford and Harvard University. The first epidemiologic model that told us this was going to be a terrible epidemic or pandemic came again from the group at the University of Hong Kong Medical School and School of Public Health, the dean of which trained at Harvard. So I think one of the lessons that I would like to take and share is the major transformation in science due to COVID is the recognition that it is an international collaborative effort. We got the first information from China. The predictions that this would be devastating and cause 200,000 deaths in the US came from Oxford. The idea of bending the curve came from scientists, epidemiologists at my school. Journals have been too slow to publish new knowledge, so Twitter and preprint journals where people submit unpublished observations with every risk of losing credit to make it available to the public has transformed the openness of science. So those are two examples where I think we've learned a great deal, and I hope we continue to learn. There's lots more to learn.
Barry, so we're learning and we're getting better, and information exchange is global. We know it's not if, but when, as I mentioned while we were having technical difficulties, that these challenges will continue, and we can anticipate that they're going to continue in the future. What needs to be done differently in the future? What are some of the things we could be doing to be better prepared for the next epidemic or pandemic? Are there some things, some takeaways?
There are some takeaways, and if you'll forgive me going back into history, there was a committee appointed by the National Academy of Sciences in 2001 to look at the vulnerabilities of the United States to terrorism at all levels. computer terrorism, cyber terrorism, energy terrorism, biological and agricultural terrorism. And I was privileged to chair the subcommittee dealing with pandemics and terrorism. And what we learned in 2001 is the US was extraordinarily vulnerable to every possible kind of terrorism, from nuclear to two guys on a bicycle with a wire cutter shutting down the electric grid in parts of the United States. That was followed by some important things the government actually did right. And one of them was in 2006. They made a guess as what the most likely pandemic would be. And if one looks at the history of pandemics, the one that stands out over all of history, from ancient times to the present, has been influenza, because the virus changes every year, as we know, because we have to get a flu shot against different viruses every year. And we're not immune to the new ones. So somebody in 2006 decided the United States needed a plan. And the key to dealing with pandemics is to have a plan in advance and not try to deal with a raging infection by the seat of one's pants. So we created the National Pandemic Influenza Plan. It exists on the web. It's a really thoughtful plan, assuming it would be flu, but it worked for absolutely any other epidemic or infectious pandemic. And in the same year, the government guessed that the most likely bioterrorism agents would be anthrax or smallpox, which smallpox has presumably been eradicated from the face of the earth, except for some stocks at CDC and in Russia. And anthrax is pretty easy to make and is a devastating infectious disease. So an agency was created called BARDA, which is an agency that has a unique mandate to anticipate future epidemics and pandemics, to anticipate biological terrorism, and the unique ability to work with industry to prepare for that. In 2006, they created a stockpile of vaccines for anthrax and smallpox. We are remarkably, perhaps even over-prepared for that terrorist threat. What they also did is invested in new technologies for vaccines against other things yet unknown. And it is that agency, the Biological Advanced Research and Development Authority, that invested in the early 2010s in RNA vaccines and in recombinant adenovirus vaccines, which got us to the kinds of vaccine platforms that are working for us now against COVID. That's one of the enormous values of advanced planning. And I don't think it's widely appreciated how when people say Operation Warp Speed and they think we've worked too quickly. This has been going on, the research has been going on adenoviruses since 1973, and on the RNA viruses, certainly for a decade. So it is still the fastest science has ever made a vaccine, but we have to think and thank advanced planning for getting us to be able to deal with this epidemic in 1 year.
Larry, thank you so much. I think we're really only at the start of the kind of conversation that we could be having for many hours this evening. But I believe at this point, Peggy is moving us to some questions from the audience. Am I right about that, Peggy?
Yes, you are. And I do have some questions for you. So the first, will we have to have annual COVID vaccines And what studies are ongoing to address that possibility?
Thank you so much, Peggy. It's a wonderful question. And as Yogi Berra, the New York Yankees catcher, once said, it's really tough to make predictions, particularly about the future. It's very difficult to anticipate what the course of COVID will be as a global pandemic. There's every reason to believe if we have enough people vaccinated here, we will be able to keep COVID at a level of annual flu vaccinations. And the worry is that there will be, like flu, emergence of new strains, which means it will be difficult to eradicate, but we'll be able to have booster shots to keep us safe over some period of time. The one worry is it possible there'll be a variant that our immune system can't see? And I would remain pretty optimistic that we can make vaccines against any of the new strains or variants that emerge.
My amplification of that response relates to something you said a few moments ago about really all the science that was going on for a very long time to bring the adenovirus and the mRNA platforms to fruition for COVID-19. And that is that there is a pipeline going on right now with strategies to develop new vaccines against variants. And the public needs to know that it isn't just a reactive mode, but in fact, science is always working very hard to stay ahead of the curve so that these new vaccines can be in a position to be used if necessary on an annual basis. So stay tuned, because some of what Texas Biomed, Harvard, other places are working on are new generations of vaccines to be able to handle the future of this particular virus, in addition to potentially other threats.
Well, thank you. I have another question here, and you've answered it a little bit, but how has recent infectious disease research helped bring the international scientific community together? And are we more aligned now than we were when you first encountered the SARS epidemic in China?
Very wonderful question, and I'm grateful for the question. In the early days of SARS, it was a Chinese problem, and we reacted to it very slowly, and the Chinese reacted with it very slowly. And as a consequence, it is not the most virulent of viruses. It could have been controlled very well. We did not develop a vaccine, and it was controlled solely by what everybody is being told we're supposed to do now. In China, in 2003, it was masks, social distancing, and lockdowns or avoiding big crowds. Jump ahead to COVID-19. Within a week of the cDNA sequence being put forward by the Chinese scientists, the companies that are developing vaccines that we are now receiving, within a week started to plan how to make vaccines against the new virus. We don't have to grow the virus in great amounts. We don't have to have factories to produce and kill the virus, although that's one way to make vaccines. We can now go by the genetic sequence, and within a matter of 63 days, Moderna's vaccine went from a computer screen to the first injection in a phase 1 trial for safety in Washington State. So the world has completely changed at the level of sharing of information and collaborations from scientists all over the world on the same issues, bringing different expertise together that no one institution, even my wonderful Harvard, can claim to have in one place.
Thank you. I have another question here. When will the vaccine be available to children, do you think?
What I can say is that the trials for one of the vaccines, for two of the vaccines, have begun in children. And one of the reasons it's delayed that I think people have to understand, there are two reasons. One is that children, by and large, have not gotten serious illness from COVID as opposed to people over the age of 60, 65, where 80% of the deaths have occurred. So there are severe syndromes in children. Mercifully, they're very rare. The second reason is children are not small adults. So one has to be very careful of redefining the best and safest dose for children, which we do not know and cannot directly extrapolate from adult dosages. So the trials are beginning starting at age 16 down to 12, 12 down to even earlier for one of the vaccines. And they will test about 6,000 kids. There will not be 40 or 50,000 person trials. These are really trials to say what's the safest dose for children that produces an antibody response that we're pretty confident would protect them against disease and neutralize the virus. And I would predict all of the companies would have that information by the last quarter of this year, if it all works out well.
And can we be confident of the potential long-term effects of the vaccine in children who are vaccinated at a very young age?
The only way to be sure of long-term problems is to study them for a long time. So this is a new infection that we've studied amazingly enough for a period of 11 months. I think the longest anybody who's received a vaccine has the vaccine for is something on the order of 8 or 9 months. And the good news is, of the millions of people who've gotten the viruses, the number of adverse effects that anyone has reported are extraordinarily low for any vaccine. So these are platforms that appear to be quite safe. And if the dosages turn out to be okay, I would predict they would be safe for the short and long term in kids. And let me contrast that with the disease itself, which we're only now learning with long haulers, of even people who had minimal infection, weren't even sick. Perhaps half of them, 50%, are showing fatigue months later, or hearing changes, or muscle changes, such that we are still learning about the long-term effects of the disease. I'm quite confident the long effects of vaccines will be very much less.
Great. Has the World Health Organization been effective, or does it need to be restructured or reimagined, in your opinion?
Oh, that's a hard question. I've spent a good part of my life flying in and out of Geneva, not for COVID, but for TB and leprosy for over 20 years. I think people have a misunderstanding of what WHO is. WHO is not like an organization. It's not like Texas Biotech. It is an intergovernmental organization. The governing board is 194 ministers of health. They have to all be kept happy and informed. Imagine a corporation with 194 trustees, and you can understand the challenge of the Director General at WHO, who is faced with a crisis essentially every day somewhere, whether it's cholera in Yemen or measles in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And he has no resources, minimal resources. The budget of WHO is absurdly small, on the order of $2 billion a year, which would not fund a single hospital of any size in Texas. So the role of the WHO is to bring the expertise and resources of the world together to focus on any problem of international concern. And to expect WHO to create vaccines or run off and solve problems would be unrealistic. Their job is to bring the governance of countries, the ministers' health, together at least once a year formally, but on a regular consultation basis, and bring the expertise like Larry and people at universities and research institutes, and the ministers in the countries that have to mediate and deliver health services. Their job is to coordinate all of that. And I have to tell you, it's a challenging job. And whatever they do will not be enough, and whatever they do will be criticized. And that's the nature of the job. In the case of COVID, they did something really important, and the world let them down. They created a program by which they were asking the 8 or 9 countries that produce vaccines to donate vaccines so that they could equitably be distributed to low and middle income countries. And as you know, what's happened is we are in a war of nationalism where countries are competing with each other for who gets credit to put a vaccine into this country or that country. And that was not the concept of COVAX, the WHO program. It's still not too late to make it function, but we have to be able to share what we know and have with the World Health Organization, or we're going to be criticized for not doing enough and only doing our own.
Thank you for that. Thank you. I have a question now for Larry. How in all your scientific experiences around the United States, Larry, noticed about of science acceptance throughout the United States. And follow-up is, your favorite thing about being in San Antonio?
Well, I think it's a wonderful question about science in general. On the one hand, it's incredible that every household in the country is talking about science in a general way. But the rapid pace of communication on a 24/7 news cycle has also created a lot of disinformation. And so you can take the information you hear and you can interpret it one way or another. And it's so far, what it's caused is some confusion about some of the information that's being disseminated. So I think that's a particular challenge, and it requires that people like myself and Dr. Bloom have events like this where we can really talk about the facts, historical facts, current facts, and the future, as opposed to anecdotes that come out online, on Twitter and other sources. So I do think that science is something that more people need to understand on a regular basis. I'm very hopeful that as we go forward, that we can take conversations like this and have them occur more regularly with the public and address questions and answers so that science is not a mystery per se, but it's understood by more and more people. And I think it's really important to be able to translate these so-called scientific platforms to words that people can understand how a vaccine works, what a vaccine is, what our immune system is, which is really what we're interested in bolstering when we're protecting ourselves against infection and a variety of other diseases. One of the most important things that I like to talk about is the understanding that by learning about viruses, and what infections they cause. We actually are also learning about triggers for other diseases, other inflammatory conditions, cancer, inflammatory bowel disease, autoimmune diseases. So this is information that we need to really talk about with the public and have a penetrating force at the local level, not just at the national and international level. What do I love about San Antonio? I will tell you that I think it's the best weather in the country. This is Judy and I have been in 5 other states before moving to San Antonio. I'm sorry, Barry. Boston is a wonderful place to live, but I particularly love the warm weather of San Antonio. But with the warm weather of San Antonio comes the warmthness of the people of this city. And I want to say that it is the community support, back to the World Affairs Council. A Texas Biomed that has incredible resources and a campus somewhat in the middle of the city has tremendous support from the community of San Antonio. And that's extremely important as we go about our mission. I always harken back to a story where Science Friday came through San Antonio and had a show on Friday afternoon for those who listen to it on NPR in the Tobin Center, which was packed. And it was stories about different aspects of science. The community is very invested in science. And I love that about the city as well. The city's been very welcoming to Judy and me. And I'm very appreciative of the recognition Texas Biomed has received and that I'm receiving this evening.
Thank you. Here's another question, this from A.B. Cruz. We have seen and of course welcomed the arrival of now several effective vaccines to counter COVID-19. However, why on the other hand is it that highly effective and readily available therapeutics seemed not to proliferate, or at least are far less publicly discussed as some had initially predicted they would?
I could try to take on, that's a very penetrating question. Viruses do not have the ability to grow by themselves. They depend on the machinery of our body's cells. So if you want to design a drug to treat a virus infection, you have to design it in a way that it kills the virus and not the cell which is growing it. And that makes drugs against viruses very, very difficult. In fact, we have very few drugs for any of the viruses that we know about, and they only work at certain times early in infection and don't work all that well. And the fundamental difference between clinical medicine and public health is we're in the business in public health of prevention. What vaccines do is prevent people from getting sick, being hospitalized, and dying. Whereas drugs and clinical medicine are addressed at people who are ill and are being treated to ameliorate or cure their illness. And that works very well with bacterial infections. Penicillin is a miracle drug. We treat pneumococcal pneumonia, we treat salmonella, we treat many bacteria because they don't grow easily within cells. But when you kill a virus, the chances are when you kill the host cell, it makes it a very, very narrow window to get a therapeutic drug that is safe and effective against any virus. And COVID is an example.
I would add that today, as we speak, there's still way too many infections going on, and we still have a lot of people in the hospital sick with COVID-19. So I think that the pipeline for therapeutics is critical here. As Barry pointed out, it's very difficult to have effective antivirals. Right now, what you hear about, and has been out for a while, are these monoclonal antibody therapies, which have some limited utility if given at the right time, and they help alleviate some of the symptoms, but really only incrementally. They're also intravenous, which is not the most effective way of distributing a therapy. I know there are new forms of it that will be easier to administer. But I think the question is right on in the sense that it has been a slower field in not getting as much press. But I will tell you that there are new therapeutic strategies in the pipeline. I think these therapies are going to be very important because there are still people getting sick and we need to make them feel better and not have the number of deaths we have today. So at the end of the day, it's the vaccine that prevents infection and ultimately gives us a chance to eradicate a epidemic or an outbreak more effectively. But therapy is critical. And recently, Dr. Fauci has been talking more about development of antivirals that are more specific for the coronaviruses. But we still have a long ways to go with therapy. I just think we need to keep pushing. And at Texas Biomed, we are testing new therapies as well as next generation vaccines, because I think they're incredibly important ultimately.
This question is kind of an off-take of what you were talking about, the viruses and bacteria, and that is, have we made any headway in addressing and curing MRSA?
Treating MRSA?
Mm-hmm. Treating.
Treating.
And preventing.
Yes, there is a constant effort to treat methicillin-resistant infections. There are newer antibiotics that seem to work quite well, but there is a problem that many new antibiotics that work very well against bacteria face. They're often quite toxic. For example, in my field of TB, there's a new class of drugs that really works better than any of the old drugs, particularly in drug-resistant individuals. But you can only 25%, you can only take it for so long, and 25% get so sick from the drug that they stop taking it. So the threshold of effectiveness versus toxicity, even for good drugs, becomes very difficult. And mercifully, because MRSA is such a major problem, there are some good drugs that are coming out. They're probably not inexpensive, and they would have some toxicity, but they get people through, which is the bottom line.
I do like the question, because if we get past the pandemic, resistance to current therapy is a major issue, and still a major issue for people who end up in the intensive care unit. And not only MRSA, but some of these highly resistant bacteria that are of a different class, have a fancy name, gram-negative bacteria, who are adapting very quickly and developing resistance to anything we have. Those challenges are going to continue for us. In this country, still the #1 cause of death in our intensive care units is sepsis, which is typically a bacterial infection. So we have to keep pushing forward, not just for the next pandemic, but also for resistance to our current therapies. And it just allows me for a moment, since you're talking to two tuberculosis researchers, to remember that tuberculosis, HIV, and malaria didn't just go away when COVID-19 became a pandemic. Those infections still rage worldwide with a lot of resistance and really no effective vaccine. So there's a backdrop here, and even some of our public health infrastructure has been diverted to COVID-19 when these other infections require tremendous support from the public health sector. So that's another challenge we face. And I think that's one we need to keep working at to help solve the problem of antimicrobial resistance.
All right, so here's a question from wonderful Jama Rubin. Myths and conspiracies have been associated with pandemics for thousands of years. How do you think we should approach the dissemination of accurate information so that myths and conspiracies are flushed out and science leads the way?
If I knew that, I would be in somebody's administration in Washington. What a wonderful, wonderful question. What makes the disinformation and misinformation about COVID different than SARS in 2003 or H1N1 in 2009 influenza is two things that we didn't have then. One is clearly government-sponsored disinformation in the race for nationalism in science. There are countries actively trying to mislead people about the quality and effectiveness of US vaccines relative to vaccines produced elsewhere. We've never seen anything like that before. And the second, of course, is social media that were not well developed in 2003. We had television, we had cable, but we didn't have very many social media. And what we've learned is not so much how to deal with them, but one imprint of misinformation is stronger than 100 scientific explanations with data to persuade people who don't want to be persuaded. I would think this is a major problem that none of us in science are in a position to solve. And the communications and educator people in this arena are struggling with what to do. And as you know, there'll be a congressional hearing tomorrow in Congress with the heads of 3 of the major social media to ask what they can do to limit misinformation. And that's going to be very challenging to the First Amendment and to the health of the public.
And no greater challenge, I would say, than what we're about to face in the next 2 to 3 months with an acceleration of availability of vaccines. I believe there'll at least be a 4th vaccine on the market, or at least for emergency use authorization next couple of months. And that is vaccine hesitancy, which directly relates to the question by Dr. Rubin about the impact of disinformation, which can make people very hesitant, particularly in the setting of new vaccines. Now, these vaccines are highly effective. These vaccines are in the 80 to 90% effective range. This is unbelievable among our most effective vaccines compared to even the seasonal influenza vaccine. And I'm very hopeful that as more and more people get vaccinated, feel good about it, and actually are healthy as a result of the vaccine, that will help us in a peer group way talk to others about taking the vaccine, create some positive peer pressure to help us get over the current challenges we're going to face with vaccine hesitancy, because ultimately we still need to get the vast majority of the population immune to help alleviate the spread of this pandemic, particularly as variants emerge. So it's a critical topic, and we'll look forward to that hearing tomorrow.
Peggy, if I could just add one word to Dr. Rubin's really penetrating question. I have long been advocating that the most important ingredient in any vaccine is trust. And what we know is that there is a limited amount that scientific data and evidence in technical journals can engender in the way of trust. And what is emerging, certainly in our city and our state, is the need for those groups of people who are vulnerable and those groups of people who are hesitant, not to hear directly from me or Larry perhaps, but from trusted members of their communities, a wider public than just the scientific community. And one of our roles is to translate the scientists, the science that we know about, to journalists, which I try to do once a week at the school, or to religious leaders, or to community activists. These are people who are trusted locally far more than a distant professor from Harvard is likely to be.
Well, thank you. We have time for one more question. And that is, when do you think we can expect developing countries to receive vaccine enough that they can achieve herd immunity?
I wish I could project the future. And there are enormous limitations. We're in a battle of vaccine nationalism, which means that countries are going to have difficulty, unless they're autocratic, sharing their vaccines with other countries before they vaccinate their own populations. We're already seeing complaints in Russia and, as you can tell, in Western Europe. There is no obvious reason to me we can't do both, but I would say that until the vaccine producing countries can politically make available their vaccines at low cost without the need for deep freezing and things that are not possible in sub-Saharan Africa, it's going to be a long time, and certainly not before the end of the year. Whether we can keep up in the world with the emergence of escape variants, so as we protect the US, Western Europe, and the big countries, if variants emerge, will we be able to go back to the whole world again and give everybody a booster shot? This is going to be an enormous challenge in global cooperation. We've not met that challenge previously. I wish I could be more optimistic we would meet it in future.
You know, too, because I know we're wrapping up, let me make the comment that what that emphasizes is that, people ask, so when's COVID-19, so, when it's over, or when will it be over? We have tremendous challenges ahead. And I'd say that we, in the public health sector, in the science sector and community sector, are going to have to keep at this, understanding that it is a global threat, not a Western Hemisphere threat or a regional threat. And that's really some barriers we need to continue to break down. I think on the scientist side, we work very well on in a global community, but there's a lot more than the science. And stay tuned for an international symposium the end of April that Texas Biomed is hosting, where we have 50 speakers from throughout the world talking about the intersect between public policy, public health, and infectious diseases. Because as Dr. Bloom just said, they intersect very directly as we try to tackle these challenges.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Bloom and Dr. Schlesinger, for a very entertaining and informative chat. We couldn't let this night get by without messages, Larry, from two more of your fans. And again, Dr. Bloom, thank you so much for your input. I feel a great deal smarter than when I started this conversation. And we appreciate your participation. And I'm sorry about the technical glitches. Hope everybody had plenty of wine on hand. So I'm waiting to get mine. So anyway, here's some messages from two more of Larry's fan club. Thank you all.
Hi, Larry. Congratulations on your big award as International Citizen of the Year for the World Affairs Council. This is a huge honor and one that you so well deserve, given your vision for both Texas Biomed and the future of San Antonio as a leader in San Antonio. In both areas, you exemplify a strong desire for global engagement, and your support of Texas Biomed and its goal to become a globally recognized Institute of Infectious Disease is one that is highly commendable. And I would like to congratulate you once again on this big honor.
Congratulations, Larry. This is a real honor. I think you've done a tremendous job at raising public awareness about infectious diseases, not only with COVID, but infectious diseases of global, national, and local significance. It's been amazing to see Texas Biomed really be the go-to place to learn information about infectious diseases. Again, congratulations, truly well deserved.
Thank you again. And Larry, we all are huge fans of yours, and we're so grateful to have you in San Antonio and heading up the wonderful institution, Texas Biomedical Institute. I'm looking forward next year, March 3rd, 2022, to seeing all of you in person for our gala next year. And I'm hoping we won't have to do virtual anymore. And now I will let you get back to your wine and your dinners, and I hope you're safe and healthy. And thank you again to all of our wonderful sponsors. Good night.